Viewers, good day. Catcher in the Rye. It is one of the best among the literature of the world. The Catcher in the Rye, which is written by J.D Salinger. J.D Salinger, The Catcher in the Rye. So let us see what is it. And this, The Catcher in the Rye is a set around the 1950s and is narrated by a young man named Holden Caulfield. Holden is not specific about his location while he is telling the story, but he makes it clear that he is undergoing treatment in a mental hospital or sanatorium. The events he narrates take place in a few days between the end of the fall school term and Christmas, when Holden is 16 years old. Holden's story begins on the Saturday following the end of the classes at the Pansy Prep School in Hagerstown, Pennsylvania. Pansy is Holden's fourth school. He's already failed out of 3 others. At Pansy, he has failed 4 out of 5 of his classes and has received notice that he is being expelled. But he is not scheduled to return home to Manhattan until Wednesday. He visits his elderly history teacher Spencer to say goodbye, but when Spencer tries to reprimand him for his poor academic performance, Holden becomes annoyed. Back in the dormitory, Holden is further irritated by his unhygienic neighbor Clay and by his own roommate Stradlater. Stradlater spent the evening on a date with Jane Gallagher, a girl whom Holden used to date and whom he still admires. During the course of the evening, Holden grows increasingly nervous about Stradlater's taking Jane out, and when Stradlater returns, Holden questions him insistently about whether he tried to have sex with her. Stradlater teases Holden, who flies into a rage and attacks Stradlater. Stradlater pins Holden down and bloodies his nose. Holden decides that he has had enough of Pansy and will go to Manhattan 3 days earlier, stay in a hotel and not tell his parents that he is back. On the train to New York, Holden meets the mother of one of his fellow Pansy students. Though he thinks this student is a complete bastard, he tells the woman made-up stories about how shy her son is and how well respected he is at school. When he arrives at Penn Station, he goes into a phone booth and considers calling several people, but for various reasons he decides against it. He gets in a cab and asks the cab driver where the ducks in Central Park go when the lagoon freezes. But his question annoys the driver. Holden has the cab driver take him to the Edmond Hotel, where he checks himself in. From his room at the Edmond, Holden can see into the rooms of some of the guests. In the opposite wing, he observes a man putting on silk stocking, high heels, a bra, a corset, and an evening gown. He also sees a man and a woman in another room taking turns spitting mouthfuls of their drinks into each other's faces and laughing hysterically. He interprets the couple's behavior as a form of sexual play and is both upset and aroused by it. After smoking a couple of cigarettes, he calls Faith Cavendish, a woman he has ever met but whose number he got from an acquaintance at Princeton. Holden thinks he remembers hearing that she used to be a stripper, and he believes he can persuade her to have sex with him. He calls her, and though she is at first annoyed to be called at such a late hour by a complete stranger, she eventually suggests that they meet the next day. Holden doesn't want to wait that long and winds up hanging up without arranging a meeting. Holden goes downstairs to the lavender room and sits at a table, but the waiter realizes he's a minor and refuses to serve him. He flirts with three women in their 30s who seem like they are from out of town and mostly interested in catching a glimpse of a celebrity. Nevertheless, Holden dances with them and feels that he's half in love with the blondie one after seeing how well she dances. After making some cracks about his age, they leave, letting him pay their entire tab. As Holden goes out to the lobby, he starts to think about J.D Salinger, and in a flashback recounts how he get to know her. They met while spending a summer vacation in Maine, playing golf and checkers, and held hands at the movies. One afternoon during a game of checker, her stepfather came onto the porch where they were playing, and when he left, Jane began to cry. Holden had moved to sit beside her and kissed her all over her face, but she wouldn't let him kiss her on the mouth. That was the closest they came to necking. Holden leaves the Edmund and takes a cab to Ernie's Jazz Club in Greenwich Village. Again, he asks the cab driver where the ducks in Central Park go in the winter, and this cabbie is even more irritable than the first one. Holden sits alone at the table in Ernie and observes the other patrons with distaste. He runs into Lillian Simmons, one of his older brother's former girlfriend, who invites him to sit with her and her date. Holden says he has to meet someone, leaves and walks back to Edmond. Morris, the elevator operator at the Edmond, offers to send a prostitute to Holden's room for $5, and Holden's agree. A young woman identifying herself as Sunny arrives at his door. She pulls off her dress, but Holden starts to feel peculiar and tries to make conversation with her. He claims that he recently underwent a spinal operation and isn't sufficiently recovered to have sex with her, but he offers to pay her anyway. She sits on his lap and talks dirty to him, but he insists on paying her $5 and showing her the door. Sunny returns with Morris, who demands another $5 from Holden. When Holden refuses to pay, Morris punches him in the stomach and leaves him on the floor. While Sunny takes $5 from his wallet, Holden goes to bed. He wakes up at the 10 o'clock on Sunday and calls Sally Hayes, an attractive girl whom he has dated in the past. They arrange to meet for a matinee showing of a Broadway play. He eats breakfast at a sandwich bar where he converses with two nuns about Romeo and Juliet. He gives the nun $10. He tries to telephone Jane Gallagher, but her mother answers the phone and he hangs up. He takes a cab to Central Park to look for his younger sister, Phoebe, but she isn't there. He helps one of the Phoebe's schoolmates tighten her skate, and the girls tell him that Phoebe might be in the Museum of Natural History. Though he knows that Phoebe class wouldn't be at the museum on Sunday, he goes there anyway, but when he gets there, he decides not to go in instead, takes a cab to the Baltimore hotel to meet Sally. Holden and Sally go to the play, and Holden is annoyed that Sally talks with a boy she knew from Andover afterward. At Sally's suggestion, they go to Radio City to ice skate. They both skate poorly, decide to get a table instead, Holden tries to explain to Sally he is unhappy at school and actually urges her to run away with him to Massachusetts or Vermont and live in a cabin. When she refuses, he calls her a pain in the ass and laughs at her when he reacts angrily. She refuses to listen to his apologies and leaves. Holden calls Jane again and there is no answer. He calls Carl Luce, a young woman who had been Holden's student advisor at the Wooten School and who is now a student at Columbia University. Lucy arranged to meet him for a drink after dinner, and Holden goes to movie at Radio City to kill time. Holden and Lucy meets at the Wicker Bar in the Seton Hotel at Wooten. Lucy had spoken frankly with some of boys about sex, and Holden tries to draw him into a conversation about it once more. Lucy grows irritated by Holden's juvenile remark about gay man and about Lucy's Chinese girlfriend, and he makes an excuse to leave early. Holden continues to drink scotch and listen to the pianist and singer. Quite drink, Holden telephones Sally Hayes and babbles with their Christmas Eve plan. Then he goes to Lagoon in Central Park where he used to watch the ducks as a child. It takes him a long time to find it, and by the time he does, he's freezing cold. He then decides to sneak into his own apartment building and wake his sister, Phoebe. He's forced to admit to Phoebe that was kicked out of school, which makes her mad at him. When he tries to explain why he hates school, she accuses him of not liking anything. He tells her his fantasy of being the catcher in the rye, a person who catches little children as they are about to fall off a cliff. Phoebe tells him that he has misremembered the poem, that he took the image from Robert Burney's poem. So Holden calls his former English teacher, Mr. Antolini, who tells Holden he can come to his apartment. Mr. Antolini asks Holden about expulsion and tries to console him about his future. Holden can't hide his sleepiness, and Mr. Antolini puts him to bed on the couch. Holden goes to Phoebe's school and sends her note saying that he is leaving home for a good and that she would meet him at lunchtime at museum. When Phoebe arrives, she is carrying a suitcase full of clothes and she asks Holden to take her with him. He refuses angrily and she cries and then refuses to speak to him. Knowingly she will follow him, he walks to the zoo and then takes her across the park to a carousel. He buys her a ticket and watches her ride. It starts to rain heavily, but Holden is so happy watching his sister ride the carousel that he is close to tears. Holden ends his narrative here, telling the reader that he is going to tell the story of how he went home and got sick. He plans to go to a new school in the fall and is cautiously optimistic about his future. So this is the story of The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. The theme of this novel is alienation as a form of self-protection, and beside this we have painfulness of growing up, the story of this boy Holden, the phoniness of adult world, and the religion, inaction. Many factors affected his life, appearances, performance. So these are the theme of this story, written by Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, one of the good novel of his time, and I think you will enjoy this novel when you go through the pages of it. Thank you.